Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be diving into a question that's got both of us kind of like scratching our heads and flipping through our copies of Foundation. Does the Mule Asimov's infamous mental manipulator actually fit the mold of Nietzsche's Übermensch?
It's a great question. It is, and one that really, I think, forces us to confront some pretty fundamental assumptions
Yeah,
about power, free will, and maybe even the nature of the universe itself.
right. I mean, we've got these amazing excerpts from the Foundation books right alongside Nietzsche's own work,
Yeah.
and I'm already feeling like we're about to go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, let's make sure we have our bearings first. Before we can really analyze the mule, I think we need to be clear on what we mean by this Übermensch concept.
Okay.
Nietzsche wasn't talking about a superhero or, some kind of galactic dictator.
Okay, so break it down for me. What is an Übermensch?
In a nutshell, it's about transcending the limitations of conventional morality and creating your own values. It's about willpower, self-mastery, and really pushing the boundaries of human potential.
So not just conquering planets then.
Exactly. It's about an internal transformation, a radical shift in perspective.
Got it. So how does the Mule, this mutant who throws the whole galaxy into chaos, possibly fit into that picture?
Well, that's the million credit question, isn't it?
It is.
Let's start with how the mule disrupts the supposedly predictable world of psychohistory. So, Hari Seldon, the brilliant mathematician, basically used math to predict the future of the galaxy.
Right, and he set up the Foundation to kind of shorten that inevitable period of barbarism after the Galactic Empire falls.
Exactly. The Foundation is meant to navigate this transition and eventually establish a new empire.
Right.
But Seldon's plan, as brilliant as it was, had one major flaw. He didn't account for the mule.
Yeah, because, how do you factor in a mutant with emotion-controlling powers into a mathematical equation precisely? Right.
The mule's very existence seems to challenge this whole notion of determinism, the idea that the future is preordained.
Right.
And we see this in the source material. Beta, one of the protagonists, reflects on how every general knows that attack of the Foundation is suicide.
Right.
Except for the mule.
It's like he's playing a different game altogether. He's not bound by the same rules.
And that's where the comparison to the Übermensch gets really interesting. The Übermensch is all about breaking free from conventional constraints.
Yeah.
Challenging the status quo.
So is the Mule some kind of cosmic accident, a random anomaly that throws a wrench into the works? Or is his appearance as disruptive as it is somehow part of a larger, perhaps unknowable plan?
That's a question that has haunted Foundation scholars for centuries. Is the mule truly breaking free from determinism, or is he simply a variable that Seldon, for all his brilliance, couldn't account for? Is there even a difference?
Okay, so we've got this fundamental question about whether he's a product of chance or some kind of cosmic destiny.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the more tangible aspects of his power. One thing that always struck me is the contrast between the mule's physical appearance and his immense influence.
Yeah.
We tend to associate power with physical dominance, right? Like Belrios, the general in the Foundation books. He's described as this imposing, physically powerful figure.
It's a classic trope.
Right. But with the Mule, Asimov turns that expectation on its head.
He does.
And we even have this account from Magnifico the Mule's Jester, where he describes the mule in almost superhuman terms. A man of mighty frame with burning crimson hair. He even says he couldn't pull down the mule's extended arm with all his strength.
Wow.
It's like Magnifico himself is buying into this image of physical power.
Yeah, and yet in the very next breath, Magnifico tells us how the mule would dangle him by his belt high in the air just for amusement.
Right.
It's such a jarring juxtaposition.
Right. It's almost as if Asimov is deliberately undermining the idea that physical strength equals true power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this gets to the heart of what Nietzsche was exploring with the Übermensch.
Okay.
It's not about brute force. It's about will, about mental and psychological dominance.
So could the mule's physical weakness, if you can even call it that, actually be a strategic advantage? I mean, if people underestimate him, if they're distracted by his seemingly unimposing appearance, that could give him a psychological edge.
Absolutely. It challenges our preconceptions about what power looks like and how it operates. The mule's strength lies in his ability to manipulate emotions, to instill fear and loyalty.
Okay, so we're seeing how the mule's power operates on a different level than just brute force. But let's talk about how he actually uses that power. It's not just about conquering planets. It's about reshaping how people feel. He creates this cult of personality around himself.
And this is where we start to see a potential divergence from that Übermensch ideal. Remember, for Nietzsche, the Übermensch creates their own values.
Right.
They don't impose them on others.
But the mule is all about control. He demands absolute loyalty. We see this in his relationship with Ebling Miss, the psychologist,
Right.
who he pushes relentlessly to try and duplicate Seldon's work.
Yeah.
It's almost like he needs to control people's minds as much as their actions.
And this raises a crucial question. Is the mule's control driven by a genuine desire to create a new order, or is it fueled by something darker, something like revenge?
Right. There's that chilling quote where the mule says he needs loyalty from his generals, but only fear from his clown.
Yeah.
That suggests a deep-seated resentment, a need to dominate stemming from his own past pain.
And that's a classic Nietzschean theme.
Right.
The idea that unexamined resentment can warp the will to power, leading to cycles of domination and control.
So we're left with this unsettling question. Is the mule truly free, or is he a slave to his own need for vengeance? Is his rebellion against the Seldon plan a genuine act of self-creation, or is it just another form of reacting, of being defined by the very thing he's trying to overcome?
And this brings us to the heart of the matter. Is the mule the only truly free being in this universe, or is his rebellion an illusion?
Because if even Hari Seldon couldn't predict him, it seems like he's operating outside the predetermined framework of psychohistory. But then again,
Nietzsche argued that an Übermensch doesn't just break free from external constraints, they transcend internal limitations as well.
okay,
They create their own values. They're not defined by reactions to external forces or pre-existing systems.
so the question becomes, is the mule doing that? Or is he in some way still playing by Seldon's rules, even if he thinks he's breaking free?
That's a question we'll need to explore further, and to do that, I think we need to shift our focus to the mule's legacy.
Okay.
Did he actually reshape history, or was he ultimately doomed to fall back into those same cycles of domination?
Which of course begs the question, what would a truly lasting legacy look like for someone like the mule? Could he have transcended his pain and built something genuinely new?
Well, for that, I think we need to delve into the mystery of the second foundation, the force that the mule fears most.
Ooh, now things are getting really interesting. Looks like we'll have to continue this deep dive in part 2.
So picking up where we left off, I think the question of the mule's legacy is really crucial. Did he achieve lasting change, or was he ultimately just a blip on the radar of galactic history?
Yeah, it's interesting because Asimov doesn't really give us a definitive answer in the Foundation books.
Right.
He leaves a lot open to interpretation. We know the mule disrupted the Seldon plan, but did he really create anything new in its place? Or was he, as you were saying, just reacting, playing out a role in a grander scheme he couldn't even comprehend?
It's a fascinating dilemma, and that's where the comparison to Nietzsche's Übermensch, I think, becomes even more intriguing. Remember, Nietzsche wasn't interested in temporary disruptions or fleeting victories.
Right.
He was concerned with fundamental shifts in values, the creation of new ways of being in the world.
So in that context, could the mule, with all his power and ambition, have actually transcended his need for control? Could he have built something truly new, something that would outlast his own reign?
Well, let's look at the evidence. We see that the mule is capable of incredible strategic thinking.
Okay.
He conquers planets not just through brute force, but by exploiting their psychological weaknesses, understanding their fears and desires.
Right.
He also seems to have a genuine fascination with Hari Seldon, even a kind of grudging respect for the man who, in a way, predicted his own rise.
Right, and that's most evident in his relentless search for the second foundation.
Exactly.
He's clearly obsessed with finding them even at the fight of his power.
Exactly. And this is where I think we can see a glimmer of potential, even if it's ultimately unfulfilled.
Okay.
The mule recognizes that there are forces at play in the galaxy that even he can't fully control. And instead of simply trying to crush those forces, he wants to understand them.
So is that a sign of him evolving, moving beyond that need for total domination?
It's possible, but we also see the flip side of that. The mule's methods are still deeply rooted in manipulation and fear. Remember that chilling scene where he dangles Magnifico, his jester, high in the air?
Yeah, it's a disturbing image, and it really stuck with me.
Yeah.
There's this sense of casual cruelty, almost a bored amusement in the way he wields his power. It's like he's playing with people's lives just to see what will happen.
And that, I think, gets to the heart of what separates the mule from a true Übermensch.
Okay.
Nietzsche argued that true freedom isn't just about breaking free from external constraints.
Right.
It's about overcoming the internal limitations that hold us back. The fears, the resentments, the need for control. It's about questioning our own values, confronting our own shadows, and constantly pushing ourselves to evolve.
So is the mule even capable of that kind of self-reflection? Or is he, as you suggested earlier, stuck in a cycle of reaction, always defined by Seldon's plan, even as he tries to dismantle it?
That's the crux of the matter, isn't it? To truly embody the Übermensch ideal, the mule would have to do more than just conquer and control. He would have to confront the pain of his past, the resentment that fuels his need for domination. He would have to create genuinely new values, not just impose his will on others. And ultimately, he would have to let go of control, embrace the uncertainty of a future he couldn't manipulate.
So was he doomed from the start? Doomed to repeat the same cycles of power and control that he was trying to escape?
Well, Asimov doesn't give us a clear answer, but he does give us a tantalizing possibility when he introduces the second foundation, the mysterious force that the mule fears above all else.
And they managed to stay hidden from him even at the height of his power. That's no small feat considering his mental abilities.
Exactly, and that raises a fascinating question. What if the second foundation, this group that the mule sees as a threat, is actually closer to Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch than the mule himself?
Hold on a second. Are you suggesting that a group of intellectual hiding in the shadows are more Übermensch than a galaxy-conquering mutant? How does that work?
Think about it. The second foundation are masters of psychohistory, just like Seldon, but they're also adaptable, willing to change course when necessary.
Okay.
They're not just following a set plan, they're actively interpreting and applying Seldon's principles to a constantly evolving situation.
So they understand the limitations of rigid plans. They're able to improvise.
Precisely. And they understand that true power lies not just in controlling individuals, but in understanding and influencing the flow of history itself. They're playing a much more subtle and sophisticated game than the mule, one that requires deep psychological insight and a long-term perspective.
So instead of relying on fear and manipulation, they're working on a different level, maybe even nudging humanity towards a better future.
That's the intriguing possibility that Asimov presents us with. The second foundation are not conquerors, they're cultivators. They're working behind the scenes, guiding events, shaping the destiny of the galaxy in ways that even the mule, with all his power, couldn't comprehend.
Okay, so we've got the mule, this powerful figure struggling with his own inner demons, and the second foundation operating from a place of deep understanding and long-term vision.
Right.
And somewhere in the middle of all that, we're trying to figure out what it means to be truly free to transcend the limitations of both individual ambition and predetermined plans.
It's a complex equation, that's for sure, but one that I think offers some profound insights into the nature of power, freedom, and the human condition itself.
Well, I'm definitely feeling the deep dive right now, but I think we need to keep digging. Where do we go from here? So we've got this incredibly complex picture emerging here, right? On the one hand, we have the mule, this powerful figure desperately trying to break free from determinism, but maybe can't escape his own need for control. And then on the other hand, we have the second foundation, this mysterious group, working behind the scenes, shaping events in ways we're only beginning to understand.
And the question becomes, are they any closer to Nietzsche's ideal of the Übermensch?
Right.
I mean, they seem to understand the limitations of rigid systems like Seldon's plan,
Right.
but they're also operating from a place of deep knowledge and a willingness to manipulate events.
Right. So are they truly fostering freedom, or are they just a different, more subtle form of control? I mean, they're still working to guide humanity towards a specific outcome, even if they're doing it with a lot more finesse than the mule.
That's the million credit question, isn't it? Are they manipulating people, or are they, in a sense, empowering them to make choices that align with a larger, potentially beneficial plan?
Yeah, it's making my head spin just thinking about it.
Hmm.
But I guess that's the point of a deep dive, right?
Right.
To push us to think beyond the obvious and grapple with these complexities.
Exactly. And I think Asimov, as always, is deliberately leaving things open to interpretation.
Right.
He's giving us clues, but not clear-cut answers. But one thing that strikes me about the second foundation is their willingness to adapt.
Okay.
They understand that the future isn't set in stone, that even the most carefully crafted plans need to be adjusted based on evolving circumstances.
Which is something the mule seems to struggle with.
Yeah.
He's so fixated on breaking free from Seldon's plan that he misses the possibility of a different kind of freedom.
Right.
The freedom that comes from understanding and working within the inherent uncertainties of history.
It's a classic case of mistaking the means for the end. The mule sees power and control as the ultimate goals,
Right.
while the second foundation understands that true power lies in the ability to adapt, to navigate complexity, and to guide events without needing to micromanage every detail.
So instead of having this single all-powerful Übermensch figure dictating the future, we have this dynamic interplay between opposing forces,
Yeah.
each pushing and pulling, shaping events in ways that no one, not even Hari Seldon, could have fully predicted.
Exactly, and that's a much more nuanced and I think more realistic view of how history actually unfolds.
Right,
It's not about individuals, no matter how powerful they might be, dictating events.
right.
It's about this complex interplay of ideas, motivations, and unforeseen circumstances.
Thinking about it this way makes me realize that the mule, despite all his power and ambition, might actually be a tragic figure.
Mm.
He's so focused on breaking free from determinism that he misses the possibility of a different kind of freedom, a freedom that comes from understanding and embracing complexity.
It's a classic case of being blinded by one's own ambition. The mule's desire for control ultimately becomes his prison.
Hmm.
He's so afraid of being a pawn in someone else's game that he fails to see the bigger picture, the possibility of creating something truly new and lasting.
So what if, and this is a wild thought, but what if the true legacy of the mule isn't his conquest or his control, but the disruption he creates?
Mm.
I mean, he shakes things up. He forces everyone, including the Second Foundation, to reevaluate their assumptions and adapt to a rapidly changing situation.
That's a fascinating idea. Perhaps by disrupting Seldon's meticulously crafted plan, the mule inadvertently triggers the emergence of something even greater, a future that transcends both psychohistory and individual ambition.
Whoa, so maybe the mule, even without realizing it, contributes to the very thing he was trying to destroy.
Talk about irony.
Right.
It certainly adds a whole new dimension to our analysis, doesn't it? And it raises a really provocative question.
Yeah.
Could it be that chaos and disruption are essential elements in the evolution of freedom?
Hmm.
That without these challenges, without the need to adapt and reevaluate, we might never truly break free from the constraints of the past?
That's a pretty mind-blowing thought to end on. I think we've given our listeners a lot to ponder today. The mule, the Übermensch, the Second Foundation, the very nature of freedom and determinism.
Mm.
These are ideas that could keep us debating for centuries.
And that, my friend, is the beauty of exploring these big questions. There are no easy answers, no clear-cut solutions. But by engaging with these ideas, by challenging our assumptions, we expand our understanding of ourselves, the world, and the very nature of existence.
And sometimes a mutant mule with mind control powers could be the perfect guide on that journey.
Indeed. Well, listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the mule Nietzsche and the complexities of freedom, as always. We encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop seeking new insights. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep diving deep.